Welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey!
If you are listening to this right now, you are probably the kind of person who suspects that the mainstream narrative is leaving out a huge chunk of the story.
Yeah, like 90% of it.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
You want the raw data, the uncomfortable truths, and, well, the perspectives that usually just get buried.
Totally.
So, before we even start, I need you to hit that like and subscribe button. We are going really deep today into some hidden, pretty controversial territory, and we need your support to keep these deep dives coming.
You're going to want to strap in for this one. Today's going to be, well, it's intense.
Oh, yeah.
We are looking at a text that frames itself not just as a book, but as an autopsy report. An autopsy report of Western civilization.
Which is a bold claim.
It is. It's a document that suggests the game isn't just rigged. It suggests it's being played on an entirely different board than most men even realize.
And to be clear to you listening, our goal here is to just break down the source material. We are impartially reporting on what's in the text. We aren't endorsing it. We're just laying out the argument so you can understand the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists, which is the core thesis of this work.
Right. We are just the messengers here.
Exactly. So the source material today is an ebook with a title that is, frankly, a manifesto all on its own.
It really is.
It's titled Feminized Non-Jobs, Male Taxpayer-Funded Sinecures for Women, and Welfare for a Female Supremacist Overclass Enslaving Men by Conrad Riker.
It's a title that just screams from the shelf. I mean, it tells you exactly what you're in for.
It really does. And just a heads up to you listening, the author makes it very clear right in the preface. This is not a self-help book.
No, not at all.
He actually calls it a war manual. He says if you're looking for comfort or, platitudes, you should close the book right now.
Yeah, he doesn't pull any punches.
He doesn't. This is about understanding a system that he argues has been meticulously designed to harvest male competence and replace it with female compliance.
And that right there is the core mission of this deep dive. We are going to explore Riker's thesis that the state has been captured by a specific ideology.
Right.
He argues we've moved from a society based on production, logic, and merit to one based entirely on consumption, emotion, and what he calls the bureaucratic matriarchy.
So grab your coffee, black, preferably, if we're sticking to the theme here.
Yeah.
And let's unpack this. Riker introduces a concept right at the start called the satanic inversion.
Yes.
That sounds almost theological, but he's using it to describe a structural reality, isn't he?
He is, yeah. He uses the term satanic inversion to describe the complete reversal of natural hierarchies.
Okay, break that down.
Well, in Riker's view, a functional civilization places the producer, the one who builds, defends, and maintains, at the absolute top of the hierarchy of respect.
Makes sense.
But he argues we have flipped this. Now, the producer, who is predominantly men in his analysis, is subservient to the consumer. The logic of the engineer has been completely subordinated to the feelings of the administrator.
And he doesn't just mean vaguely ruling in a cultural sense. He's talking about hard economics.
Exactly.
He's talking about where your tax dollars actually go.
We're going to cover the history of how this institutional capture happened, the economic mechanics of what he calls the wealth pump, and crucially, the solutions Riker proposes.
Because he doesn't just diagnose the disease.
Right. He offers a very specific protocol for the cure.
And I want to pause and say, if you want the full arsenal of arguments, because we can really only cover the highlights here, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy the book.
Oh, absolutely.
It's dense, it's aggressive, and it connects dots that most authors are honestly too afraid to even touch.
It is a fascinating read.
So let's start with the economic bedrock of Riker's argument, the non-job aristocracy.
This is the foundation. To understand his worldview, you really have to understand his definition of a sinecure.
It's an old word. It almost feels medieval.
It is medieval. It originally referred to a church appointment, a benefice without cure of souls.
Meaning what, exactly?
Essentially, you drew a salary from the church, you held the title, but you had absolutely no spiritual responsibilities.
Wow.
You didn't have to preach, you didn't have to minister, you literally just got paid.
And Riker takes that concept and applies it directly to the modern corporate and government world.
He argues that the modern economy, specifically the public sector and the HR-bloated corporate sector, is just awash in feminized sinecures.
We're talking about diversity coordinators, inclusion managers, empathy coaches.
Sustainability liaisons. Yeah. Riker's litmus test is really simple. Does this role generate revenue? Does it physically maintain infrastructure? Or does it simply coordinate the feelings and interactions of people who are actually working?
There's this vivid, almost cinematic contrast he paints in Chapter 3. He asks the reader to look at a construction site.
I love this part.
Right. You have a man with calloused hands, physically pouring concrete, risking injury, working in the elements to build a skyscraper.
Yeah.
Then, Riker points to the window across the street.
The climate-controlled office.
Exactly. There's a woman sitting there, sipping an oat milk latte, sending maybe 3 emails a day, paid $98,000 a year to coordinate empathy initiatives for the company occupying the building the man is building.
And Riker asks, who is the master and who is the servant in this scenario?
And his answer is that the man on the scaffolding is the servant.
He is the one generating the actual value,
Yeah.
the building, which is then taxed to pay for the regulatory bodies and the corporate departments that employ the woman.
Which leads us directly into the economics of capture. Riker doesn't just say this is unfair. He actually tries to quantify it.
Yes, he introduces the concept of the net tax negative voter.
This was the part where I had to pause and really look at the numbers he was citing. Because Riker claims that women, as a specific demographic block, are net tax negative.
It's a very controversial claim, but here is how he builds the math in the text. He isn't just looking at income tax versus welfare checks.
Right.
He's looking at the total cost of the state. He argues that women receive approximately 68% more in government expenditures than they contribute in taxes over a lifetime.
58%.
Meanwhile, men contribute about 22% more than they receive.
But where is that 68% coming from? I mean, it can't just be food stamps and standard welfare.
No, and that's the nuance of the sinecure argument. Riker counts the salaries of the non-jobs as government benefits.
Oh, okay.
If the state creates a department of DEI, and that department hires mostly women and pays them with tax dollars collected mostly from male-dominated productive industries, Riker counts that entire salary as a wealth transfer.
So in his model, the job itself is the welfare.
Precisely. It's what he calls the wealth pump. The state functions as a massive redistribution engine. It siphons resources from male productivity from the oil fields, the tech startups, the construction sites, and funnels it into female comfort and what he calls emotional indulgence.
It's a closed loop, isn't it?
Yeah.
The state taxes men to hire women who then vote for the state to keep their jobs?
That is the political capture aspect.
Yeah.
If your livelihood depends on the expansion of the empathy bureaucracy, you will always vote for more bureaucracy.
Naturally.
Riker argues this has created a bureaucratic matriarchy that is mathematically impossible to vote out of office because it is entirely self-funding through this tax mechanism.
And this bureaucracy doesn't just sit there collecting a paycheck quietly. It actively interferes with the actual work.
Yes.
Which brings us to the institutional takeover.
This is where we shift from economics to culture. Riker calls it the care cascade, or the compassion cascade.
I have to bring up the San Francisco anecdote here because it perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, the trees.
Yes. Riker describes a situation where city planners, literal engineers, and architects were ready to start a major infrastructure project. But before they could break ground, they hit a massive wall.
The apology letter policy.
Yes. They were required to write apology letters to the trees that had to be removed.
You can't make this up.
And who wrote this policy? Riker traces it back to a gender studies graduate working in the city administration who literally viewed concrete as colonial violence.
This is the care cascade in action. You take a logical, objective process like, we need a road here, and you insert a mandatory layer of emotional performance.
Right.
The engineers, who operate on pure logic, are forced to submit to a ritual of empathy. It's a humiliation ritual.
Wow.
It asserts dominance. It basically says, your logic is less important than my feelings about these trees.
And it conveniently creates a job for the person who has to review the apology letters.
Exactly. It employs the empathy expert while grinding the actual productive work to a complete halt. We see this again with the chief empathy officer at the University of Oregon.
Earning $165,000 a year.
While tuition skyrockets and adjunct professors practically live in poverty, Riker points out that this salary isn't for teaching, it's for running listening sessions.
Right.
It's the institutionalization of therapy.
This connects directly to what Riker calls the death of meritocracy. He argues we've replaced KPIs, key performance indicators, with lived experience.
It's a massive shift from objective output to subjective narrative. According to the text, If you can claim a trauma narrative or if you have the right lived experience, that gives you an authority that entirely supersedes competence.
And Riker calls HR departments and Title IX offices the gynocratic tribunal.
That is such a terrifying image.
It really is.
He views them as modern Inquisition cells. There is a specific case he cites from the University of Michigan regarding a sexual misconduct hearing.
Oh, this one was brutal.
A male student was found responsible, but the details are just staggering. There was no physical contact.
No.
There was no verbal threat. He was expelled because, according to the ruling, he looked at a woman in a way that made her feel unsafe.
So her internal emotional state became his external legal reality.
That is the satanic inversion of law. In a masculine logical system, like English common law, you need evidence of an act. Did he touch her? Did he threaten her?
Right, objective reality.
Exactly. But in the feminized system Raker describes, the woman's feeling is the evidence. If she feels unsafe, you are dangerous. Reality is defined by her emotions, not by your actions.
And Riker warns this is bleeding into the one institution that absolutely should be immune: the military.
Yeah, that's deeply concerning.
He discusses the U.S. Army replacing marksmanship evaluations with inclusive resilience assessments.
Which allegedly included crying exercises to build emotional agility. Riker argues this is the ultimate subversion.
How so?
You are taking the warrior class, which relies on stoicism, emotional control, and lethal competence, and you are trying to reprogram them with the values of the nursery. He sees this as literally disarming men by training them to be women.
But the big question the book tackles is, how did we get here? Riker doesn't accept that this just happened overnight. He traces a genealogy of this poison all the way back to the Enlightenment.
This was honestly the most surprising part of the book for me. Most people blame the 1960s, but Riker goes back to 1762. He targets Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Rousseau, the guy who wrote about the social contract.
The very same. Riker argues that Rousseau is the patient zero of the feeling over logic virus. Rousseau taught that sentiment was superior to reason. He argued that men were naturally corrupt and needed to be trained to feel.
Interesting.
Riker suggests this established the myth of female moral superiority. The idea that because women are perceived as more emotional, they are therefore more moral and natural, while men are artificial and toxic.
And then he brings in Mary Wollstonecraft in 1792.
Right. He argues Wollstonecraft didn't just want equality. She wanted a specific type of education for women that would allow them to regulate men.
Regulate them.
Yes. Riker sees Wollstonecraft as the architect of the nanny state. She laid the blueprint for the idea that male nature is a chaotic force that must be tamed, civilized, and policed by female oversight.
So every time you sit through Toxic Masculinity Workshop today, Riker is saying you are actually sitting through a program designed in 1792.
Exactly. It's a centuries-long project to domesticate the male spirit. And you see it in the language everywhere now. Riker talks about the weaponization of language.
The BBC example he gave was chilling. He found archives of Winston Churchill's broadcasts where the BBC had retroactively changed references.
They changed the word father to parent. It seems small, but Riker argues it's a deliberate act of erasing the patriarch.
Right.
By removing the specific masculine word and replacing it with a gender-neutral, bureaucratic term, you sever the link between the man and his lineage. You turn a father into a generic provider unit.
And this erasure starts incredibly early. This brings us to what he calls the war on boys and the pedagogy of victimhood.
There is a story in the book about a father in Ohio whose son submitted a bridge design for a middle school science project. It was structurally sound, mathematically perfect.
And it failed.
It failed.
Why?
The teacher said it lacked empathy.
It's a bridge. Physics doesn't care about empathy. Gravity doesn't care about your feelings.
But the school system does. Riker argues that schools have become entirely hostile environments for boys. Boys are naturally systematic, logical, competitive, and rough.
Right, that's just biology.
And the school system treats those traits as pathology. They want boys to sit still, share their feelings, and collaborate. When boys don't do that, they get diagnosed.
The nanny state matrix.
That's the term he uses. It's a 4-stage grinder. First, you pathologize male independence. Second, you medicalize male resilience. Riker claims the ADHD epidemic is largely just the medicalization of normal boy behavior.
Makes total sense.
Third, you criminalize dissent. And fourth, you replace the father entirely with the state.
He calls that familial communism.
It's a brutal concept, but it tracks. Riker argues the state has seized the role of the provider. By providing welfare, healthcare, and education directly to the mother, The state makes the father economically redundant.
Right.
The mother becomes the moral authority funded by the tax dollars of all men, while the individual father is reduced to, as Riker puts it, a wallet with a criminal record.
And if he tries to assert his old role, to lead, to discipline, to protect, he encounters the state as an enemy.
And the tragic irony, which Riker really highlights, is that this doesn't actually make anyone happy. He points to the Nordic paradox.
I wanted to touch on this.
Countries like Sweden and Iceland are always held up as the model for this feminized system. They have the absolute highest gender equality ratings.
And yet they have some of the highest rates of antidepressant usage in the entire world.
Riker's argument is that the utopia is actually just emotional flatness and chemical dependency. When you remove the friction of competition, the structure of masculine order, and the purpose of struggle, you don't get bliss.
You get a void.
You get a society that is safe, but completely dead inside.
Okay, so the diagnosis is terminal. The system is captured, the money is gone, the institutions are hostile, it feels hopeless. But Riker says the masculine spirit isn't dead, it's just gone feral.
That is the turning point of the book.
So what is the solution? What does he tell the man listening to this to actually do?
The first step is the red pill realization. You have to stop trying to fix the system. Riker is adamant about this.
Don't try to change it from within.
Do not run for school board thinking you can change the curriculum. Do not complain to HR thinking they will listen. The system is working exactly as it was designed. It is designed to consume you.
So the strategy is refusal.
Refusal. He calls for a complete strategic withdrawal. Refuse to fund the sinecures. Refuse to apologize. Refuse to participate in the rituals.
Right.
When they ask you to state your pronouns, you don't argue, you just refuse. When they demand you attend the diversity training, you refuse.
But you can't just check out completely and do nothing. You have to build something else. He talks about parallel institution.
This is where the book becomes a highly practical manual. He highlights success stories of men who have simply walked away and built their own structures. The Iron Council in Utah is a prime example.
What are they doing differently over there?
It's essentially a trade guild. They are funding apprenticeships for men in welding, coding, and construction. But here's the key. They completely bypass the university system.
Brilliant.
No student loans, no DEI statements, no gender studies requirements, just pure skill mastery.
They're cutting out the middleman, or the middlewoman in this case.
Exactly. They are starving the beast. If you don't send your tuition money to the university can't pay the chief empathy officer.
And there's Logic First Charter School in Florida.
They banned gender ideology entirely. They threw out the modern textbooks and went straight back to the great books. Plato, Locke, Nietzsche.
Back to the foundations.
They are teaching boys to think, not to feel. They're teaching logic, rhetoric, and stoicism.
And perhaps the most striking example, and the one that really proves Riker's point about human nature, was the prison reform in Denmark.
This was fascinating. For years, Denmark tried the soft approach. Empathy circles, therapy dogs, talking about feelings. Recidivism was incredibly high. Then they shifted a specific block of prisons to male-led discipline.
What did that actually look like?
Strict schedules, Aristotelian logic modules, hard physical labor, and absolutely no therapy talk. They treated the prisoners as men capable of rational thought and self-control.
And the result?
Riker claims recidivism dropped from 48% to 29% in those specific units.
That is huge.
There was a quote from an inmate that honestly gave me chills. He said, "They stopped treating us like wounded puppies and started treating us like men who could fix ourselves."
That is powerful. It shows that men, even men who have fallen through the cracks, crave structure, they crave logic. They don't want to be coddled, they want to be challenged.
Precisely. Riker's ultimate message is that the care approach is actually toxic to men. It keeps them weak. Masculine order makes them strong.
And that leads to the final reckoning in the book. Riker concludes that men need to become dangerous.
He clarifies that he doesn't mean physically violent. He means dangerous to the system.
Right.
Competence is dangerous to a system built on incompetence.
Right.
Being rational is dangerous to a system built on emotion. Being self-reliant is extremely dangerous to a system that needs you to be dependent on the state.
So if you are listening to this right now, Riker is telling you that you have a choice. You can continue to feed the wealth pump, apologize to the trees, and let your sons be medicated into submission. Or you can refuse.
Wakefulness is rebellion. That is his closing thought. Seeing the rot is the very first step toward the rebirth of masculine order.
Yeah.
You have to stop looking at the diversity officer as a well-meaning person and start seeing them as a rent seeker living off your labor. Once you see the extraction, you can't unsee it.
And that is exactly why you need to read this book. We have given you the framework here today, but the raw data, the historical deep dives, the specific strategies for refusal, that is all in the text.
It really is a manual for the resistance.
So here is what you need to do right now. Pull out your phone, go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books, buy Feminized Non-Jobs Male Taxpayer-Funded Sinecures for Women and Welfare for a Female Supremacist Overclass Enslaving Men by Conrad Riker. Honestly, just search Conrad Riker if you don't want to type all that out.
And don't just read it and put it away. Riker asks for a very specific action at the end of the book.
That's right. He wants you to leave a 5-star review. He calls every single review a brick in the wall against the feminist lie.
It's a signal to other men that they aren't alone. The algorithm suppresses this stuff actively. Your review fights the algorithm.
In a world that tries to isolate you, that signal is crucial. Also, you need to get plugged into the network. Follow the author at Conrad Renreicher on Twitter and check out his Substack. Do not stay isolated.
Knowledge is only power if you actually apply it.
Exactly. The system depends entirely on your silence and your compliance. Riker is handing you the sledgehammer to break that silence.
One final thought to leave you with. The book mentions the masculine spirit is suppressed, slandered, and taxed heavily. But it is not dead. It's just waiting for you to stop apologizing.
Powerful stuff. Go buy the book on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books. Leave that review and make sure you like and subscribe to this deep dive. We're going to keep digging where others won't. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Stay awake.